I mentioned, we've just had the festival of Janmashtami, which was the appearance of Krishna, the divine masculine, as you may have seen in the title. And next week we've got the appearance of the divine feminine, Radha. So perhaps we can start there, Ramananda. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about, first of all, why we term these personalities as the divine couple, and also what does it mean when we say the appearance?
Okay, where to begin? I was actually thinking about where to begin with this. Actually, would it be okay before we begin? Is it okay to chant a quick Mangala Charana, like to recite some mantras, just asking for blessings and auspiciousness and so on? These are very, very nice meditation. So we'll
Absolutely.
just quickly say these mantras. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagurajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padajana Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Ladita Sri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So yeah, I was thinking about how, where to begin, because it's such a big subject, and you know, we've sort of done enough of these by now to know that no matter what we speak about, when we get to the end, we're going to be thinking there was other things we could have said, other things we wished we had said, um, and it goes on and on and on and on. We can never run out of things to say about such a wonderful topic. But I thought to begin at the beginning, particularly for most of us here. Now, how many of us are here right now? There's 45 of us here. And, that's 45 people who are all on some sort of a spiritual journey. Everyone, it's a Think Gita wisdom talk. So whatever path we're on, most of us here, I imagine, are on some sort of a spiritual path, and that spiritual path has brought us to being here this evening. Just out of interest, you can either virtually or literally raise your hand. Is anyone here for the very first time this evening? Just put up your hand if this is your first ever Think Gita Wisdom Talk. Sandili, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, then please forgive me. Anjana and Andrew, Vanila. So quite a few. Well, at least some. Some are here for the very first time. But those who are here for the very first time, okay, put your hand up again if you are here because you do consider yourself to be on a spiritual journey, and that's what brought you here today. So that's, yeah, I think that's fairly unanimous. So, nowadays we've got a word which is, in a very wonderful way, becoming more and more mainstream, and that word is yoga. It wasn't so mainstream reasonably short while ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago, which is really nothing. It wasn't such a mainstream thing. And we probably mentioned this last time as well, but we can use the same example here because it is appropriate. that if anyone here were to Google the word yoga and then look at an image search, write it down now in the comments or put your hand up or even shout it out. If, give me an idea of what you would see in that image search. Let's try and make this a little bit interactive this evening. Let's have a look. Oh, yeah, it's on the meeting group chat. Yeah, so just write down in a few words what you think you would see in a Google image search of the word yoga. Asanas. I'm looking for images, image search. What would you see? You would see asanas, which means, just in case anyone's not so familiar with the term, someone in a pose. Yeah, someone answered the question that I was about to say. Yeah, Western women doing downward dog. I love that answer. Probably on a beach with a really nice sunset in the background. Really sort of stereotypically attractive young women doing downward dog or Surya Namaskar and so on and so on. So yeah, I think everyone's pretty much on the same. Oh, some men too, yeah, but mostly women. Mostly women. I've tried it, and mostly young ladies doing downward dog, super fit bods in poses, definitely. So that's the sort of idea of what yoga is. Yoga to many, many people, especially actually interestingly to people outside of a community like this. I don't think I'm saying anything new with what I'm going to say now about yoga, but there is this idea outside of a genuinely spiritual community that yoga is, maybe there's some sort of spiritual idea about it. But the general idea is that it's stretching, breathing, and so on and so on and so on. So now a few of you have already given the answer to the next question, but I'll ask the question anyway. What does yoga actually mean? And 1, 2, 3 people have already given the answer. But tell me, what is the answer? Sangeeta's saying to connect. Gita already said union with God, connection with the divine, to connect with God. Yeah, it's connection, union. Now, I was going to ask connection with what, union with what? And you're giving words like God, giving words like the divine. You're correct. This is what yoga is all about. And interestingly, when we and by the way, Prabhu, I know I said I would go off on all sorts of little tangents, but there is a purpose to all of this. So trust me, it's to do with your question. We will get there. Probably around about 5 to 9, we'll eventually arrive at the actual point. But yeah, it's this point of union with the divine, union with God. And just out of interest, put up your hand. Be honest. Who feels uncomfortable here? Actually, I'm going to ask it another way. Who feels comfortable here with the word God? Who feels completely comfortable and at ease with that word? Raji, you're looking very enthusiastic about that word. Hare Krishna. So not everyone's putting up their hand. Some are putting up the hand, but some are remaining silent. Okay, who feels uncomfortable with the word God? Be honest. Joey's a little bit sort of in the middle. There's definitely a little bit of a stigma there. There's a bit of a stigma, and we may Cynthia likes Krishna best. That's very, very nice. Yeah, but due to the way that this word God has been presented, represented, and even enforced in some cultures, it has, and I've noticed over the last maybe 20 or 30 years, there seems to be this sort of snowball, this acceleration of a growing distrust and discomfort with that word, God. So when we speak of yoga, excuse me, and we speak of union, you know, there are many, many words in different cultures, because when we're talking about connection or union, we're talking about two or more things coming together. So then the question is, well, what are those two things? The Bhagavad-gita begins by teaching about identity, that we're not the body, we're not the mind, but we are actually the soul within the body. That's who we are. We are spiritual beings, spiritual entities. And the whole point of yoga is that that spiritual entity who we are, the process of yoga allows us to reconnect or to connect with, what word are we going to use? Some cultures would say God. Some cultures would say your higher power. Some cultures may say Krishna. Some cultures may say the universe, the divine. And, you know, we all have words or expressions which we personally, individually feel comfortable with using and expressing. And some of us may use words and expressions which others of us right here in this community feel uncomfortable with. And so that can create a little bit of a feeling like you're walking on eggshells. You know, we don't want to upset anyone, we don't want to disturb anyone, we don't want to alienate anyone, but there are so many sort of words for that divine power. Now, whatever word we do choose to use, in one of the sacred, wonderful, oh, Bhagavan's very nice. Yeah, Harsh is saying they prefer Bhagavan. So Bhagavan, Krishna, God, the divine, in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, the Srimad Bhagavatam is like an encyclopedia of spiritual wisdom. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse, and I'm going to make it sound now like I'm really showing off, but actually I'm reading directly from my phone. So don't be impressed. But I'll read out the Sanskrit because it's really beautiful. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmati paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate. So Harsh, there you go. Bhagavan is right there in the verse. Who's heard that verse before? Who's familiar with it? Put up your hand if you've ever heard this one before. Anyone? I know Javat has. I probably learned it from Javat. And Prayag, you've heard it. So in this verse, and I'll read out the translation that we have here. Learned transcendentalists. Learned transcendentalists. If you're not sure, that's all of you. You are the learned transcendentalists. So learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth. So here, the Srimad Bhagavatam is just describing the general principle of the absolute truth. So hopefully that's a term that we can be comfortable with. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So these are, sometimes there's a bit of a debate that happens. What is God? What is the divine? What is the supreme? Is the supreme a person? Is the supreme an energy? Is the supreme a divine light? Is the supreme something within our own heart that is guiding us? What is the supreme? And the Srimad Bhagavatam actually says that actually that absolute truth manifests in different ways. So if you are someone who feels, believes, has faith that the absolute truth is divine energy, divine light, then you can give yourself a pat on the back because the Srimad Bhagavatam agrees with you. This is Brahman. If you're someone who believes that the supreme absolute truth is something within yourself that is guiding you, give yourself 2 thumbs up because the Srimad Bhagavatam agrees with you. This is Paramatma. And if you're someone who believes that the supreme absolute truth is a person, a being, as a supreme being, then, well, we've had a pat on the back and we've had 2 thumbs up, so you can give yourself a pat on the head, because this is Bhagavan. The Srimad Bhagavatam agrees with you. So Bhagavan, Paramatma, Brahman, these are all different features of the same one supreme absolute. Okay, now getting to the question, why do we celebrate appearance days? So of those 3, Bhagavan is the personal feature of the absolute truth. Now that personal feature, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and we can even sort of, there are even, what's the word? It's even alluded to the same things in traditions outside of the Vedic yoga spiritual traditions. So even if we read books like the Bible, so many other sort of religious traditional texts, then also we can understand that there is an aspect of the absolute truth that is a personal aspect. Now, that personal aspect of the absolute truth occasionally descends to the material world, and that is called what? What is the word that is given? Elaine, come on, Elaine, unmute yourself so we can hear your voice. What is the word that is given to the absolute truth when it descends to the material world?
Avatar.
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 Not just a good movie. Not just a good movie, but an actual spiritual concept. And if you want to know where they got the idea for the movie, blue beings with yellow stripes on the forehead. Yeah, there was a lot of interesting concepts there. So yeah, when that supreme absolute truth descends to the material world, it's called an avatar. Okay, so this is one point. What's all this about appearance days? So the supreme absolute truth in his, we'll use the word his, but don't worry, don't get triggered. We're going to come to that in a second as well. So in his personal form, descends to the material world in various avatars, various incarnations. Okay, Elaine, give me name of one particular avatar. Any will do. Krishna?
Krishna, yeah.
Krishna, okay, Krishna. Okay, anyone else want to shout out the name of another? Raji, go ahead. Say again, you're muted, Raji. Unmute yourself.
Nrsimha.
Nrsinga, wow, very nice example, Nrsinga. For anyone that's not heard of Nrsinga, we could really go down a rabbit hole with that one. So I'm going to have to really restrain myself because it's such an amazing story of Nrsinga. But Nrsinga, or Nrsingadev, is the supreme personality in a very amazing form, half man, half lion, and he comes to protect his devotees. He's very fierce to those who attack his bhaktas, his devotees, but very, very sweet, gentle, and loving to his devotees. Okay, let's go for one more. Who can name one more? I'm sort of half expecting someone to say Mirnalini. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name, but go ahead.
Vamandev.
Vamandev. No one's saying the one I thought they were going to say. You're all too learned. Yeah, Vamandev. Vamandev is like a dwarf incarnation. He appears like a small boy, and he was given a gift of 3 steps of land, and with the 3 steps he expanded himself to cover the entire material universe. Yeah. I'm thinking, I thought someone would say the other one that I was thinking. Come on, one more. Who am I thinking of? Who's the other famous? Raji, who am I thinking of? But and Jenna and Andrew saying Matsya, you're all like Avatar mad here. Raji, who am I thinking of?
Rama.
Yeah, Ram, Lord Ram. I thought you would have mentioned him a while ago. But yeah, Parashuram, Matsya. These are all different incarnations of the Supreme
Balarama.
Absolute Truth. Balaram, yeah. And they all appear at different times. And where are we? Week and a half ago? Is that about right, Prayag? Week and a half ago? Around about a week and a half ago, we celebrated the appearance in the material world of Krishna. So Krishna, this beautiful, sweet cowherd boy, very wonderful appearance of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Bhagavan, for those who don't know, the word Bhagavan means one who possesses all opulences in completeness. So Bhagavan means that they have all strength, all wealth, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation. Renunciation is a very interesting one. But when the Supreme Absolute Truth descends to the material world, they display these wonderful features of Bhagavan. So Krishna, a little over 5,000 years ago, descended to the material world and performed pastimes in his personal feature as the personality of Godhead. And we celebrate these days. Now, before we get onto the feminine, let's first of all look at why do we actually celebrate appearance days? What is it that we are hoping to achieve by celebrating the day that these avatars enter into the material world? What is the goal of celebrating an appearance day? Prayag, I'm going to hand it back to you. What do you think? What is your realization about this? Give you a chance to take over.
Well, so the appearance really is to remind us of why these personalities actually came. So obviously we've named so many different avatars already, and it allows us to appreciate them in each of these different avatars.
Okay, yeah, good answer, nice answer. Just to remember and appreciate the reasons for their appearing in the material world. Okay, anything else? Anyone else like to add anything to that? What is it that we're doing? Let's have a look at some of the comments here. Sorry, I should be paying more attention to those. What have we got? I'm still on spiritual connection. Let's go. I'm scrolling down, all I'm seeing is Vamanadeva, Matsya, Vishnu, Nrsingadev, Rama. Lots of really nice comments. Show our love towards them, glorify their divinity, to remind us of our connection to God. Yeah, all nice reasons. Now, I'll give another example, right? Why? Okay, apart from the unmentionable things that take place on the 31st of December, what is one of the main ways that we observe New Year? And I'll give you a clue, really big clue. Most of us are absolutely hopeless at it. And we, at least in the case of me, it usually lasts about a day or a week at the most. Sangeeta's saying get together and connect with one another, which is a much more nice way of celebrating than to give resolution. Who said resolution? Yeah, a few of you are saying resolutions, set resolutions. Yeah, this is the thing. You know, when we celebrate New Year, okay, you know, a lot of people go out and they're up until midnight or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, and all sorts of weird and wonderful things go on. But when the next day comes, there's like a sort of a collective sense that, okay, it's time to sort of set goals. It's time to set resolutions for the year. Now, in the case of the appearance day of the Supreme Absolute Truth within the material world, one of the ways that we can observe that is to remind ourselves that actually that Supreme Absolute Truth, whether we feel comfortable with words like God or Krishna, whether we feel comfortable with concepts such as personal or impersonal, that Supreme Absolute Truth can and will appear within our lives and within our hearts at every second, at every moment of every day. And so celebrating and observing appearance days is really a way to remind ourselves to invite God, to invite the divine, to invite Krishna into our hearts and into our lives at every moment. Now we're going to get to the feminine. We are going to get there. How are we doing for time? How are we doing for time? We're only halfway there. So we're not
Yes.
doing too bad. We're not doing too bad. So can anyone give me any examples of practical ways in which we can invite that divine to appear within our lives, within our hearts, within our minds? Elaine, go ahead.
Offer our food to him.
Offer our food. Okay. Now, to anyone who's not familiar with that, that might sound a little unusual, but you are correct. This is interestingly, this is yoga. That's something you're not going to see when you Google the word yoga. You're not going to see someone with a plate of fruit holding it up to a picture of Krishna. But this is just as much yoga as any Surya Namaskar or downward dog. In fact, hopefully not too controversially, some may argue that it's an even more powerful process of yoga than downward dog and Surya Namaskar. We can offer our food to the Supreme, to the Divine. Any other ways? Any other ideas? Let's have a look at the comments, because I'm sure I saw someone. Okay. iPhone 13. Where are you? I'm looking for iPhone 13. I know you're out there somewhere. iPhone 13, you need to raise your hand. There you are, iPhone 13. What was the way that you mentioned before? If you don't want to reveal yourself, you can write it in the comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. I just could not time. I'm Srilila Vishnupriya Devi Dasi.
Oh.
Mahamantra Prabhuji.
Oh, Hare Krishna, beautiful. And what was the thing that you said before in the comments?
Chanting only, Prabhuji.
Chanting. Yeah, exactly. Chanting Krishna's name. Chanting, mantra meditation. If you know it, say it along with me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, it sounds like a few of you know it. So that's one. But we can say Krishna, Govinda, Gopala, Ram, Nrsinga, Gauranga, so many names of the divine. And there's actually one great personality who appeared 500 years ago, and he wrote a beautiful collection of verses known as Shikshastikam. And in the second of those verses, he says, Nam namakari bahudani jashava shaktis tatrapita nyamata smarane nakala itadrishi tavakripa bhagavan mamapi durdevami drishami hajani nanurgaha. Now I am showing off because I've not got my phone in front of me for that one. And it means, oh, Supreme Lord, your holy name alone can render all benedictions to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. So within the names, within these transcendental names of the divine, then the transcendental potency of the divine is invested within those names. So when we chant these divine mantras, then this is a way of actually inviting that divine personality, that divine energy into our lives and into our hearts. And this is something we can do all the time. You can be sitting on the bus or on the tube and just quietly, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Not too loud, otherwise you may get arrested when you get off the tube. But just quietly, you can say these names of the divine and transcend the madness of wherever you happen to be. And yeah, so any other ways? Offering food, chanting names of the divine, even sacred wisdom, sacred literature these are also considered to be sort of infused with that energy of the divine. So when we're reading books like the Bhagavad-gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, these sacred yoga texts and wisdom texts, it's actually a way of directly connecting with the divine supreme energy. So in this way, when we're observing these appearance days, it's not just I'll give you the example that we gave last week. Actually, we made a little presentation. I live in Leicester, and we gave a talk at the local temple here in Leicester on Janmashtami, on the appearance day of Krishna, and we used an example. Now I'm going to give you the first sentence of a very, very famous British advertising campaign, which some of you are probably familiar with, some of you maybe not, okay? But if you are familiar with it, what I want you to do is either put up your hand and shout it out. Elaine, I'm keeping my eye on you here. Or you can write it down in the box, okay? Okay, you ready? I'm going to say the first line of a famous British advertising campaign, and I want you to finish it for me, okay? A dog is for life. Who knows how that ends? A dog is for life. I'm looking for hands up. Lou, okay, shout it out. But you need to unmute. You need to unmute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, a dog is for life, not just for Christmas.
You are 100% correct. A dog is for life, not just for Christmas. This was 1978.
Wow.
There was animal rights activists were very, very concerned that children were being given puppies as presents for Christmas, and they were very, very happy on Christmas Day. And then when Boxing Day came and they realized that puppies are not always house trained and that they had very heavy responsibilities that were now going to last for the next 10 to 15 years, then those puppies were being either abandoned or sent to animal shelters and so on and so on. So these animal rights activists, they wanted to really sort of impress upon the British public that it's a heavy responsibility. So we twisted this little advertising campaign a little bit last week to Krishna is for life, not just for Janmashtami. So Krishna appears, excuse me, Krishna appears on the day of Janmashtami, but it's not that, okay, from the morning till the night of Janmashtami, we celebrate Krishna's appearance and then move on and see you in a year, Krishna. No, it's Krishna. We're inviting Krishna at every moment to appear within our life. Okay, so that's a little something about appearance days. Prayag, and anything on that? Anything you want to say about that before we sort of move on a little bit?
I guess before we move on to Radharani, one thing you mentioned was Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago. So why is that still relevant for us in our modern day?
Well, when the supreme absolute truth appears in the material world, then that's always going to be a big thing. You know, it's like I'm trying to think of examples. You know, we remember famous, I mean, here we are 2,000 years later, and many people are still celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Why? Because what that person brought to the world was so profound, so relevant, so world-changing that we don't want to forget. We actually want to sort of keep that. And it's also testimony to the fact that, okay, so many people have been and gone. Now, okay, we can get into a whole debate here about actual specific dates. But if I was to ask anyone, what are we celebrating on December the 25th? Most people would have an idea that it's Christmas Day, it's celebrating the birth of Jesus. But if we were to give out, you know, I was gonna say, okay, okay, here's one. Who here knows of a famous person that they share their birthday with? Put your hand up if you know of someone famous that you share your birthday with. No one. Oh God, it's just me. It's just me. I share my birthday with Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones. So, but none of you know that. If I was to say, what's 26th of July famous for, you wouldn't know. Why? Because no matter how famous that person is, they haven't, and that's not even that long ago. You know, I mean, it's kind of getting a little too long ago to still be running around on the stage, but that's another subject. But, you know, it's what, 70, 80 years ago? And we don't, you know, how many of us really care about that? But here we are 2000 years ago, and many people still care about, you know, the appearance in the world of a personality like Jesus Christ. Why? Because to be perfectly frank, what Jesus Christ brought to the world is kind of more valuable in the big picture of things than what the Rolling Stones brought to the world. So why are we still why is the appearance of Krishna in the material world still relevant? Well, because Krishna brought the Bhagavad-gita. And the Bhagavad-gita is still and will remain such an incredibly, infinitely valuable book of spiritual knowledge and wisdom that if we take advantage of it, it can completely transform our lives. Not only it can transform our lives, it can transform the world. It can really transform the world. You know, so I don't know. Would you like to reflect anything back there, Prayag? Would you want to share any of your own insights there, or?
No, I think what you've shared is actually really it's a nice reminder that actually when a certain personality leaves such an impression, you know, there's cause for us to remember them. And you obviously named musicians that we still remember, even if it's just a few years ago. But actually somebody as profound as the Supreme who's appeared, even if it's 5,000 years ago, or in the case of Jesus, 2,000 years ago, and they leave such you know, a wealth of knowledge, you know, of their own example, then yeah, it's cause for celebration.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, I used to and to be honest, I still do a little bit. I like music, and I used to listen to a lot of music. You know, before I became a monk, I was a monk for 10 years. Before that, I used to listen to a lot of music. And I used to like the Beatles, amongst other bands. The Beatles were a band that I really liked. And around about 10 or 15 years ago, I was in Waterstone's bookshop, and I was looking at some books, and sort of in the, you know, the way that Waterstone's is divided, it's almost like these sort of cubicles where it's like different sections. And I could hear in the cubicle next to me a couple of young ladies talking, and they obviously came across a book about the Beatles. And one of them picked it up and said, "Oh, the Beatles. Were they a band? They were a band, weren't they?" And I really had to sort of bring my ego under control. I felt like marching into the next booth and sitting them down and educating them, but I managed to restrain myself. But you know, that was the most famous musical group in history. There has never been, and any no matter how big and no matter how successful and no matter how famous and no matter how many albums and records a band sells, they will always be compared to the Beatles. They will always be compared to the Beatles. They can outsell the Beatles 100 times, but they'll always be compared to the Beatles. There will never be a band that's successful. But here we are, 50 years later, 60 years later, people are forgetting about them. But here we are 5,000 years later. Here we are on, what day is it today? Thursday night? Thursday night, and we're talking about the Bhagavad-gita. And we know who spoke it as well. You might know a song by the Beatles and not know that it was by the Beatles, but we know that the Bhagavad-gita was spoken by Krishna. So, you know, somehow the resonance of that still continues to resonate with the world. Yeah.
That's really nice. Thank you for sharing. We've obviously
So
spoken a bit about Krishna, and you've just emphasized that he was the speaker of the Bhagavad-gita. I can see a lot of faces, and there's a good portion who are feminine. So perhaps this is an opportunity to segue into the appearance of the divine feminine. Don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
yeah, it's a very in some ways mysterious, but such a wonderful subject that who here, put up your hand or your emoji, whichever you like. Tell me if you've ever visited a sort of Krishna or Hindu or Vishnu temple at any time. Anyone who's ever visited. So, or put up your hand if you've seen photographs or videos of such places. If you've never been, but you've sort of seen pictures. So quite a few of you. Now, when you go to these temples, most of the time, with very few exceptions. Now, one exception, interestingly, might be, but not always is, but might be Nrsingadev. You mentioned Nrsingadev before. Nrsingadev may be an occasional exception to this rule. But most of the time, okay, just throw it in the chat box, right? All I want is a number. I just want a number. How many people are you going to see standing on the altar? Most of the time, or at least, let me rephrase that. At least how many people are you going to see standing on the altar? Because I immediately remembered something. 3, Raji. I don't know who's the third. Who's the third? 6. Okay, I'm sort of getting out of my depth here. 7. Okay, all right. At least let's go for at least 2. Let's go for at least 2, because wherever you've got Krishna or wherever you've got Ram. Okay, who mentioned Ram before? Raji, you mentioned Ram. Okay, who is Ram never going to be without? Tell me.
Both Sita and Lakshmana.
Sita and Lakshman, but occasionally you just see Sita and Ram.
Yeah.
Sita and Ram. So sometimes Sita and Ram. Okay, who who else should we ask? Let's have a look. I don't know who's talking here. Okay, Raji, I'm just going to put you on the spot. Pop quiz. Okay, who is Lakshmi never going to be? Oh, I gave you the answer. I was going to say who is Narayan never going to be without? Who's Narayan never without?
Lakshmi. Mahalakshmi.
Lakshmi. Yeah, Lakshmi. So Lakshmi is always there with Narayan. Sita is always there with Ram. Elaine, who's always there with Krishna? I'm really putting you on the spot today.
Yeah, I see that.
Sorry.
Radharani. That's okay.
Radharani. So yeah, Krishna is always with Radha. So the idea is that the supreme absolute truth is this complete sort of aspect of masculine and feminine aspects of the supreme divine. So the supreme absolute truth means both together. The masculine supreme and the feminine supreme. They both have different sort of moods, like a different mood, but together they make up the supreme absolute truth. So sometimes, when we talk about, God, he descends to the material world, and immediately it's like, what's all this he stuff? But actually, when Krishna or Ram or Narayan, or actually even Nrsingadev, when they descend to the material world, they are always in that complete unit of absolute truth with both the masculine and the feminine. Now, so where are we? Around about a week, right? in around about a week. In about a week, we are celebrating another appearance day, and that is the appearance day of Radharani, Radha. So Radha is the feminine counterpart of Krishna. And as Krishna, in one sense, you could say, is like the supreme father of everyone, Radha is like the supreme mother of everyone. And just like, generally speaking, a father may have one mood and a mother may have a different mood. That, you know, it is a reality. Masculine energy and feminine energy are realities. Now, most of us, practically everyone in the world, has both masculine and feminine traits. You know, some more, some less. And just give you an interesting example. Traditionally, stereotypically, in an old-fashioned sense, you know, men might be known as the ones who, you know, like the breadwinners, and then in the sort of old-fashioned traditional sense, ladies may be more known for raising the children, being homemakers and so on. I know that, as you know, nowadays that's not necessarily always the case, but like in my family, I'm the one who loves to do the cleaning, and I'm the one who loves to do the cooking. And I will fight for those roles because I like nothing more than putting on my earphones, listening to a Think Gita wisdom talk, and cleaning my house. And I will fight for the right to clean my house because I like to do that. So we all have these sort of so-called masculine and feminine traits within us. And the Supreme Absolute Truth also has masculine and feminine aspects. And Radha is the supreme manifestation of the Supreme Absolute Truth's feminine aspect. And okay, who knows the Hare Krishna mantra? I know a lot of you do because you said it before. Who knows it, or who's somewhat familiar with it? Most of you have heard it, Hare Krishna. So in the Hare Krishna mantra, there's 3 words. Well, there's 16 words, but there's 16 words, which is like a combination of 3 words. Hare, Krishna, and Rama. These are the 3 names or 3 personalities. Now, Krishna and Rama, these are 2 different names. Who was that? Who was that? Oh. So Krishna and Rama, these are 2 names of the masculine aspect of the Absolute Truth, Krishna and Ram. And Hare is it's known as like vocative. It's the sound representation of the feminine aspect of the divine. And through that feminine aspect of the divine, the soul, the actual, our spiritual self, finds complete shelter from the pain and anxiety of material life. And so the personality Radharani has 25 unlimited transcendental qualities. So we say unlimited because we may say, well, if we're talking about the Supreme Absolute Truth, but they only have 25 qualities, Krishna, you know, surely they would have more than that. But within those 25 qualities, there are unlimited sort of aspects and subcategories. And one of those qualities of Radha, and I personally find this to be very wonderful. There's actually lots of wonderful qualities, but the one I really love is Radha can give shelter to all kinds of devotees, bhaktas, spiritual seekers. Radha can give shelter to all. Now, the reason I like that is because in a spiritual movement, okay, put up your hand who's heard of Keshava Swami. Who's heard of Keshava Swami? Quite a few of you. Okay. Before 8 o'clock this evening, who had heard of Ramananda Das? A lot less. A lot less, because Ramananda Das is not a big, famous, popular, world traveling devotee. He's just a little insignificant, unknown Bhakta living in Leicester, struggling to make ends meet. But fortunately for Ramananda Das, Radha can give shelter to all kinds of devotees, not just the big ones, not just the famous ones, not just the popular ones, not just the ones who have got really, really fancy titles, and the ones who are managing the temples. And no, Radha gives shelter to all devotees. And so when we and am I going on a little bit, Parag? Is this okay?
This is okay. We'll
Is this
start
okay?
wrapping up shortly, but yeah, I think should so it's a nice point you've mentioned about shelter, so I'm happy for you to go on that.
So just to sort of wind up this point, years and years and years and years ago, I heard a really nice class, really, really nice presentation by one devotee, one Bhakta. And this devotee made a point that who here has ever sat in a car when it's raining really, really heavily? And it's like sometimes, I mean, it can be soothing, but it can also be a little frightening when it's raining really heavily and it's hitting the metal roof. And sometimes it almost feels like the car's almost shaking, and it's like you feel like the car's going to break. It's like, can the glass actually take this? It's raining really heavily. It's making so much noise. You can practically feel it. You can feel it vibrating all around you. So you're completely surrounded on all sides by rain smashing against the vehicle that you are in, but not one drop of it touches you. No matter how much it shakes, and no matter how much it vibrates, and no matter how much it might scare you, especially if you're a little child sitting in that car, it might be quite scary, but none of it gets you wet. And so in the same way, we're in this material world, and Krishna in the Bhagavad-gita explains that in the material world, there are three modes of material nature, three aspects or qualities of material nature, and that every one of us is being bombarded by those at every moment of every day. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. And they're just bombarding us. They're affecting our mind, affecting our senses, affecting everything around us. If you want to know what the mode of passion looks like, go on the London Underground at rush hour, and try and deal with that. I was there last week, and it's like you come off and you feel like, okay, I need a holiday now because I've just spent 15 minutes on the London Underground. It's so intense. So these modes are just hammering us all the time. But Radha, especially in this form of the mantra in which she has appeared in the material world, the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna. So this is Radha and Krishna, that when we take shelter of the supreme absolute truth in the form of this sound representation, then this will give us shelter from the onslaught of the modes of material nature. And as we learn to chant that mantra, and as we learn to take shelter of that mantra, then more and more and more we will find that no matter how much we feel the shaking, the vibration, the screaming and shouting and the pressure of the material world, it is possible to rise above it and to feel some shelter. And so when we celebrate a day like the appearance of Radha in the material world, it's a day to take shelter and to, sort of take shelter of that wonderful divine energy of the absolute truth. Okay, so I've gone on and on and on and on. Sorry. But yeah, I'll hand it back over to you, Prayag.
Yeah, and I think, there's a few comments, Joey's mentioning that was a really nice metaphor, and, this metaphor of the car and just giving you the shelter regardless of the hailstones, the incessant rain, and you just kind of feel safe. It's such a nice analogy to meditate on, especially as now the next week we're going to have Radha's appearance. So thank you for sharing that. If I could ask you one last question, as kind of round off, if there's any kind of one meditation you'd like to leave the audience with, what would that be, just based on what we've discussed today?
Well, I guess the thing that immediately comes to mind now, getting into some spiritual scientific technicalities here, and I actually I don't want to embarrass myself. I'll hand it over to Javat actually in a second, see if he remembers. But the spirit soul, who we actually are, the spirit soul is known technically as marginal potency. Is that Tatastha Shakti, Javat? Is that correct? Tatastha Shakti, thank you. So yeah, oh, by the way, that rain analogy, Javat, that was Kokil Bihari. So yeah, so the soul is known as Tatastha Shakti, or marginal energy. Now, what that means literally is that our nature, our tendency, our sort of, whether we like it or not, it's part of who we are and what we are, to take shelter. Our nature is to take shelter. Our nature is to sort of come under the influence of a higher power. Now, for most people in the material world, that happens unknowingly. That we find ourselves under the control, you could say under the shelter, but it's more like under the control of the modes of material nature, of the material energy. And really speaking, you know, we are not the controllers. You know, the spirit soul is not meant to be a controller. The spirit soul is always sort of happiest under the shelter and under the sort of influence of a higher power. Now, in the material world, that higher power really isn't such a favorable situation. And so we have two choices. We can either allow ourselves to just remain under the shelter of this higher power of material energy, or we can shift to the shelter of divine energy. So I think especially on this particular appearance day that we're talking about next week, the appearance day of this feminine divine energy of Radharani, then it's a day to really meditate on the principle of taking shelter. You know, just coming under the divine protection, the divine shelter, the divine loving embrace and kindness of that supreme motherly energy of Radharani. And yeah, it's definitely something I hope to take advantage of. Is that okay?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So with that, I think we'll round off for this evening.